Hey, good morning and welcome to Breakthrough Walls. I'm Ken Walls and I'm your host. And today I have a real life rock star on the show. Peter Vekselman is coming on. Wait till you hear this guy's story. It's amazing. So do me a favor and do your friends a favor and go ahead and share this out so everybody has a chance to hear Peter's story. Stay with us. We'll be right back. And we're back. Let me bring Peter on. Peter, welcome to the show.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Ken. Excited to be here.
Grateful to have you here. So, I started this show a little over 4 years ago, and it was literally to help people get unstuck in life, because I think that we all go through the crap in life, and a lot of people get stuck and stay stuck. And so that's what this is about. So why don't we start with you telling everybody where you were born and raised, where it all started for you?
Well, it might be a little bit unusual for most of your guests. I was actually born in Russia, Soviet Union, Moscow,
Wow.
and we immigrated here pretty early age. I was just a couple of years old, and in the 70s, actually, believe it or not.
Wow.
I might be the oldest person on this podcast right now.
I don't know. I'm 50. I just turned 54. So
okay, well, we're equal. We're equal.
Are we? Yeah. I was gonna say I'm not a spring chicken.
Well, you just look like you're 30.
Oh, good Lord, have mercy! You just became my favorite guest of all time. So.
I like it.
So you moved here, like that's when it was still the USSR.
Yeah, in the middle of Cold War, actually. Best way I could describe it, it's like imagine bringing like an Al Qaeda kid here today, and I mean, really, that's and the funny thing, not the funny thing is, but it was so unusual back then. I was like literally showcased. I still remember, and the first day I ended up at school, they literally took me around to all the classrooms and like stood me up front, like here's a little guy that our whole country hates, and
oh my God,
say hello to Peter. I mean, really, that's really what it was, and I think that's kind of initially, believe it or not, my first step towards trying to become successful and knowing that you gotta overcome a lot of things, including a lot of people that may want the best for you, but who really don't know what they're doing at best. But yeah, that's kind of how I started here in the States many years ago.
And those were adults.
yeah.
Oh my God.
And I'm telling you, they meant well, and I know what the point of the show is, and overcoming and stuff.
Yeah.
And really it was my first venture into understanding that, sometimes very meaningful people do some, crappy, unintentional things. And ultimately, it's really up to you. And it was up to me back then, because I was, my parents didn't believe in the whole immigration thing, meaning when we came here, they said, we're American. And so we didn't go into any immigrant communities. I mean, it was just, and on top of that, Ken, to top this whole thing off, the first time I was ever told we're coming here, we're on a plane coming here. Because back then, middle Cold War, it was very tough to get out. So no language skills, definitely no people skills,
Wow.
And I was definitely the oddball. But that's what started my path to, I guess, where I am today initially.
I find it interesting, though. I've always been kind of mesmerized by this, that immigrants have a tendency of coming over here and kicking butt and really building the American dream for themselves. And yet there are many Americans born and raised here with all of the stuff that struggle through life, and it amazes me. What is that? What do you think that is?
Well, I mean, it's exactly what happened to me. Most people, the reason they immigrate here is because wherever they're at isn't working. Wherever they're at, they're not getting what they want. And most of the time, most of us come here with nothing. So we start with that hustle attitude. We start with opposite of what you said. When people are born here, a lot of things are given to them. A lot of things here are taken for granted. Even, I kid you not, the very first time in my life I was ever walked to in the grocery stores when we came here. I don't remember what happened last week, but for some reason I remember those initial couple days. And Ken, I still remember my parents and I being walked into a grocery store, the kind of grocery store that everybody here would take for granted. And I literally thought it was a plant. I literally thought, well, they must take everybody here. Everybody that comes to the United States gets brought to this whole thing. But you see, when you see things like that, you can't help it but fall into an appreciative mode. You can't help it but look at this country as an immediate advantage. You can't help it but right away realize, wow, this is something special. Whereas most people that are born into this kind of stuff, I hate to say it, it's a little bit of a disadvantage. It's a little bit of a disadvantage. And, I kind of personally struggle with it a little bit to this day, having kids. And, trying to figure out, am I really giving them an advantage by giving them the things that are available here? And, what's the fine line between enjoying the good life, but at the same time, building some core principles that honestly, to this day, some of the things that have got me to where I am, believe it or not, came from, this 1977 when we immigrated here. And that was the last thing I wasn't trying to learn back then. I wasn't trying to be tough back then. I wasn't trying to be successful back then. I was just kind of going through life. But to me, those were very, very important things that I learned back then. And it got me on the road to what I guess some people would consider to be pretty successful.
You were just trying to learn English and not be put on display in school.
And on top of that, they thought they were going to give me a real advantage. So they decided that, I don't know, I can't remember how old I was, but they decided, well, since he doesn't know the language, he's brand new, let's put him in a grade 2 grades below. So I was a total freak. And I was the biggest kid, which made me even more freakier on top of that. And so it's like, line them up every possible way that you can. But again, look at it now. First of all, as you know, when you go through things, you don't know any different. So I didn't know any different, and especially when you're a kid, you really don't know any different. But again, out of all the amazing things that my parents had done for me throughout my life, taking the chance they did in the 70s to come from what was back then pretty rough country, obviously, to this, which in any regard was a paradise compared to that.
Yeah.
I could never thank them enough for that. That was the biggest move in my life. No question about it.
I think it was Shakespeare or one of those people that are smarter than me said the greatest disservice we do to our children is to steal away their hunger. And it's literally what you were just saying, because I think about the same thing. I had to fight for everything I've got. And I think, I think about that because pain is the predecessor of all wisdom, right? So that's what gives you the advantage is, coming from, I've never been there, but I've heard that when it was the Soviet Union, it was kind of brutal in a lot of ways.
It's a third world country. I mean, nobody looks at it right now, or even back then, just because of the military plight, military toughness. But really, it was no other way to describe it. It was an absolute third world country.
Wow. So we got the legendary Bengay III on here. Wow. So Peter, when you were growing up and going through school and high school and all this stuff, where was this, by the way? Where did you guys end up landing here?
Well, we ended up in Akron, Ohio, because my dad was, until the day he retired, he actually ended up being probably the top engineer in the world for tires.
Is that
Auto.
where you live now?
No, I live in Atlanta, but back then in the 70s, Akron, Ohio was the tire rubber capital of the world.
Yep.
Everybody was headquartered out of the Goodyear, Goodrich, General,
Yeah.
you name it. And so that's how we ended up in Akron, because when we as people in the industry started realizing that my dad had gotten out, he was very heavily recruited. So that was just a natural place. And the company that he started with back then, General Tire, he ultimately retired from a number of years ago.
That I live in Ohio. Did you know
okay,
that?
Yeah. I grew up in Akron, went to Miami University, and all that kind of stuff.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I'm north of Columbus a little bit.
Okay.
So Marion, you ever heard of Marion, Ohio?
I want to say I've heard of it, but I couldn't say I can pick it out on the map. And I don't even know if I've ever been through it. Only because, well, I used to take that trek from, Akron, Cleveland area down to Miami. And I did go through Columbus. So I don't know. On the way to Columbus, I maybe hit an exit called Marion.
Yeah, you may have seen an exit, but it's not. The only reason to come through this town is if you're trying to get some, meth or something. I'm kidding. That's a joke. That's a joke.
I'll let that one sit.
It's a joke. But anyway, so wow, that's really cool. So do you feel like all of the crap my wife's on here, my wife said stop, that's fun, she's from this area, so do you feel like that all of that, and I don't want to call it crap, because honestly I look at it as you were given an opportunity that most Americans aren't given, and that's the pain of having to readjust and learn a new language and everything. Yep. But do you feel like that kind of was what drove you to what, and we're going to get to what you're doing now and talk about some of your successes, but do you feel like that was kind of that pushed you toward success?
Yeah, 100%. Again, when everything that you get, you have to earn. When everything you get, you have to fight for. And I do mean literally everything. You got a language barrier, you got a barrier in terms of the enemy of the country. You got, you're coming at a weird age, because back then, kids don't really understand. That really, really started. Yeah. So there's no question. Absolutely. That was it's funny, Ken, as long as I've been talking about this, I never phrased it the way you kind of framed it right now. Because I never literally connected the two, but you're right. That, a lot of times people say, well, where did it start? And I always think it started with me when I got in the business, but you're right. It started with me a lot younger than that. It started with me back then when I had to do the kind of things most people don't have to do or don't want to do. I had to go out there and, that's interesting as I think about this. That's even when the entrepreneurship started, because as I started getting a little bit older in age, obviously son of immigrants, we weren't, ultimately my parents became uber successful, but back then in initial years, they weren't.
Right.
We started from zero. Guess what? Kids are sitting at home. I'm out there shoveling snow to make an extra, $20 a day. Their kids are going to parties, and I'm figuring out how to get T-shirts so I can go sell door to door. So it's interesting, again, the way we're framing it, that, that is really where I believe my entrepreneurship really, really started back then, because some of the stuff I just had to get done.
Yeah.
When you do things you have to get done, they just over a period of time become habits. And, they're no longer kind of like, oh, I can't believe I got to do this. Or and I'm sure this, one of the biggest handicaps people have is the handicap of, feeling sorry for yourself. Well, when you got no friends, you got no one to feel sorry for, to cry to, right? And you had no one to do that. So, that is where it started in those initial years when we came to this country.
Hey, I shoveled a lot of snow myself. I went door to door. I'm sure you did.
I did too.
Just out here trying to make a buck and help people out along the way.
I love it. I love it. Awesome, but the interesting thing, Ken, I also learned the generosity of people back then. Yeah. You can't just I never looked at things from a perspective that, well, I just had it so much tougher. We're talking about it right now, but on the other side, I learned the other side of things. when let's face it, when a 10 or 11-year-old knocks at your door to shovel, 2 feet of snow, you ain't going to get a perfect job done. You know what I mean? So I
Right.
also learned that other side. I think I learned the camaraderie. I learned the giving people a chance and all that kind of stuff. Because in the end, a lot of people gave me a lot of chances back then just for being who I was. The little kid on the street that out hustled everybody. So I learned both sides of the equation, and I think ultimately you got to have both sides. I don't think you could beat your way to success. I don't think you could just tough your way to success. I really think in order to really fully enjoy success, you have to have both sides of the equation. It's not just who the toughest kid is. It's also who's got the passion side, who's got the passionate side, who's got the understanding side, the empathy side, and all that. So all of that really was formulated for me at those initial early stages of my life.
When did I'm assuming, and I hate to assume things, but I'm gonna make an assumption because you came here. How old were you again when you moved here?
I was a little bit under 10, like
Okay.
8, something like that.
Okay. So you were speaking Russian already. English wasn't a second language, I'm sure. So you got here, you were forced to learn English, I would imagine, rather quickly. But with that, there had to be an accent. Like people had to be able to, back then as a kid, they detected it. So here you are, this little Russian kid running around the streets of Akron, knocking on doors and doing your thing with an accent as well.
Well, as you know, Akron's not a big city. It might
No,
not be as small as Marion is, but
it's
Akron's not a
not.
big
It's
city.
much bigger than Marion.
Well, but the crazy thing is, I was, believe it or not, the very first immigrant that ever came to Akron. So it was very easy. I didn't have to have an accent. I didn't have to look a certain way. Everybody knew about me. We were the first immigrants from the Soviet Union to come there.
Oh
So,
my
but
God.
having said that, Ken, I did not have an accent. This is an interesting fact, maybe for your audience. For those that have younger kids, if you ever want to teach your kids a language, the key is to do it before you're 13. If you're learning something before you're 13, I don't have an accent now, obviously.
No,
And I never really did. So that's really the magical thing. So before 13,
wow.
you really don't have an accent. And I learned another thing is, when you get thrown into the school area, you learn pretty quickly as a kid. You know what I mean? You get acclimated pretty quickly. So I can't remember how long it took, but I'd say probably within 5-6 months, I was up and running, no problem.
Wow, that's incredible, man. So you graduated high school in Akron. You said you went to college at Miami, which is down by Cincinnati, right?
Yep.
Miami of Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And talk about when you look, my wife is so in agreement. She talks about that all the time because in Marion, they don't really like it's when you get into high school, they start, which is insane. Like,
She's
my
right.
wife. Yeah.
She's right. If that's important to your family, but that's the key. Catch it when they're young.
Yeah. So you went to college. What did you
My
sorry about that.
no problem, no problem. If you were to ask my parents, they would say I majored in drinking and partying. If you were to ask me, I majored in Miami. But and here's another thing I learned about myself in school, that ultimately, when I don't see value in something, and I think that's why a lot of people, don't get these breakthroughs. I really truly believe you have to see some kind of value in what you're doing. Just to go through the motions of life, or just to go through the motions of trying to be better, but if it's just emotions, it's very hard. And I learned at a young age because I never really saw value in school and in education, which is weird because both of my parents are world-renowned PhD scientists, and they'd show up at school and the teachers would be shocked. They'd be like, "No, that cannot possibly be your kid." But just to condense this whole thing to a very quick answer, when I graduated Ken Miami, not only could I not get a job, I couldn't even get an interview. Like, so, senior year, everyone's excited. Hey, I got a Procter and Gamble is interviewing me. I got the big six for, accounting interviewing me.
Yeah.
I couldn't even get an interview, because if you go to Miami in 92 and I graduated, I'm sure I know you've had some incredible speakers here and incredible people you interviewed. And I'm sure you've had plenty of the top of the top of the top. Well, if you go to Miami in 92 and you look at the very bottom, I literally finished in the very last in my class. If I would have drawn any lower, I wouldn't have graduated. I mean, that's just the best way I could describe it to you. I hated school, never saw value, never understood what I was doing it. And couldn't even, like I said, couldn't get a job.
Now, did mom and dad pay for school?
Yeah, by that time, I went through school. And again, my parents, because of who they were, my mom designed nuclear power plants. My dad was, a world-renowned scientist. Interesting thing. A lot of people say, well, it's tough. I can't get this. They started with zero when we came here. So they were in their upper 40s. You and I discussed how old we are. They weren't too far away from where they started at zero, like literally, because when you leave a country like Russia, I promise you, they ain't letting you take anything. They started from zero, again, not knowing the language, not having any advantages, and achieved they became quite a huge success story. So by the time I got into college, they were able to pay for it and all that kind of stuff.
So they feel really good about that investment.
Well, I came from one of those families where there was no option. They didn't care. They didn't care how good or how bad. There's those families where it's just assumed.
Yeah.
I was never really asked. But if my dad was on this call right now, he would tell you he's never been so scared in his life when watching me grow up academically. Because again, when you're at the highest levels academic wise, that's the only thing you think that you can. That's the only option you think you have. You got to be the smartest kid. You got to be the So he would tell you that was the scariest part of his life, is watching me go through school at an absolutely awful pathway that I was taking it from an academic perspective.
Sure.
I had some other things going on, but from an academic perspective, there was nothing good going on.
I would imagine at some point the entrepreneur in you kicked in during college and you started selling beer bongs or togas.
Well, the interesting thing, I share with people, I never one time that I could remember ever went to a party. And again, it wasn't in some of it was a little bit because of the history, kind of a bit rough childhood and all this. So I wasn't the most outward. I wasn't the most social kid. I was very much an introvert. But you're right. At that point, when the kids were partying and doing the beer bongs and all that, I was selling stuff. I mean, I was again door to door knocking on doors, selling hats, T-shirts, whatever it was.
So awesome.
And the interesting thing is, back then I didn't realize I had this entrepreneur bug. That's another thing I always tell people, how you could really help your kids. And it wasn't my parents' fault, because they were academics. They weren't sure what to look for.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I try to do with my kids is, I try to pinpoint to them what their success traits are. Because a lot of kids already show some incredible traits when they're younger, but because nobody points that out to them, they veer in a totally wrong direction in life. No one pointed out to me. If somebody would have pointed out to me when I was 12, 13, 15, man, you got the gift for sales. Hey, you got the gift for taking 100 no's and, keep on knocking on doors. No one pointed that out to me. It took me until I was in my 30s to kind of start figuring myself out. Up until then, I was just bouncing. And then it started hitting on me. I'm like, look, I got certain talents. I got certain skill sets. And so that's one of the things I try to do with my kids. Like when I see some kind of a talent or some kind of a gift, I try to point it out to them, and B, try to, if at all possible, send them in that direction. Because what an advantage you can have by, capitalizing on your gifts.
Yeah. My buddy Joe here says, I find the best entrepreneurs were below average students. You know what? That I agree with that. I actually walked out of high school in 12th grade and never went back because I was like, this is bull crap. I like you guys are nuts. And I remember, Peter, I remember thinking, I've got stuff to do. I got to go make some money. Y'all are nuts. Like I can't do this. And so I didn't even go to college. But I'll tell you something. I had my hero on the show a few months ago, Brian Tracy, and he's a high school dropout. And I remember hearing him way back then, man, on remember the cassette tapes? I'm playing Brian Tracy cassette tapes, and I heard him say, I dropped out of high school, and I was like, oh my God. So this guy made it, and that means I have a chance, and so everything you're saying is just absolutely amazing, and I can so relate to it all, except for the
100%.
college part. I didn't do that, but
Well, don't worry. I might as well have dropped out. How about that? You could relate to that. Pretend it never took place. Probably would have been the exact same. Had I left in 12th grade and not finished the next 4 years, I would have been exactly where you are. I just, drank a little bit more for the next 4 years.
yeah, right. That's so funny. So at some point though, and I've said, and I'm sure you would agree. I don't know. I've said, I think every kid should come out of high school and go sell door to door something for a couple of years. Go sell door to door, knock on doors, and learn human communication skills.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with
Yeah,
that?
there's no question that when you do these kind of, I don't know what you call them, rut jobs, bottom end jobs, certain things, this is where you get tough.
Yeah.
This is, you get more skills than just, you learn the people skills. You do. Yeah. But, ultimately we all, there's other ways that, but what you really do is you learn how to get tough. And I think a backbone of most entrepreneurs that you talk to is we're tough. We're tough. And so I think a lot of these entry-level position jobs, that's what they get us. That is the biggest thing I think I got out of all that. I was okay back then. And like I said, I couldn't get a job. So I ended up, doing some crazy stuff. I would drive to people's houses, have no shows. To me, being tough became the norm. Yep. To me, rejection became part of the process. Yep. To me, disappointment, boom. But I also, along the way, got very good at certain things. I got very good at sales. Again, unfortunately, I didn't realize that I was good in sales until I was almost in my 30s. I developed some people skills, which to me are the best skills you can have. Amen. I mean, I'll take people skills over, finance degree all day long. Yep. So those things, and I'm almost afraid and embarrassed to say it, Ken. Gosh, I wish I could have gotten my kids to do it. Again, that's the one disadvantage of being in this country is that it's I did it because I had to do it. I did it. Yeah, I mean, I had to contribute. I had to do what I had to do. Yeah. But it's just there are some advantages to having there are some disadvantages to having advantages.
I totally agree.
So, but yeah, I do agree. Some of these basic bottom of the barrel jobs, they're killer.
Yeah.
They're it's interesting. I was selling magazines back then, Ken, and I remember being in, how the boiler room where I don't even know if they sell magazines over the phone, but you and I grew up during the same time. Remember they used to have places where we'd sold magazines. And I tell you, I learned something very important, when I was, in my teens that to this day has served me big. But I remember when I started working at this operation, we're selling magazines, I heard through the grapevine, it was a huge room, that in, row 10, seat 6 sat Mary, and Mary was the best. And back then, just somehow by accident, I'm like, I got to go listen to Mary. And that little listening to Mary to this day has taught me it ain't about how good you are, it's how good you surround yourself, the people around you. And that's how you learn. And that, what I mean? So during those times, during those kind of basic, gut-wrenching kind of like, man, what am I doing? Is this, man, that's what you learn, and that's what you take forever and ever and ever with you.
Yep.
But the skill sets I learned there, I talk about them and I teach them to this day.
That's so awesome, man. So talk about you said you had kind of an awakening. And am I seeing this bracelet on your wrist?
Yeah, I just went. He was just Grant was just in town. Um, he was
That's so
just in
awesome.
town a couple weeks ago, and you know, I always tell people, look, I don't care how good, how tough, how smart. You're gonna have down moments. You're gonna have down times. You're gonna question. There's no one above that. But what I also tell people is you have to figure out what brings you back. You know, I don't think there's just that one thing that could snap us all out of it. You know what I mean? To some people, it's this learning. To some people, this.
Yep.
I'm telling you, to me, and you know what this bracelet said? This gets me out of my little funk 95% of the time. I just got to look at this, and
That's
95%
it.
of the time, boom, I'm good. I'm
It
good.
lays right next to me all the time. I had a whole jar of these. Just a little sales tip for anybody listening. I bought a whole jar of these on grantcardone.com. I'm
Mhm.
not getting paid for this, by the way. This is not a promotional, but I like problem clients. I've given these to. Like
100%.
they can't make a decision. Here, you need this bracelet
Yep,
thing.
I
So
agree.
so talk about when you said you had kind of a shift in your 30s. You started figuring out who you were. I'm sure there were different jobs and things you did along the way, but when did you find the thing that you do now? And just for everybody listening, kind of give a prelude to what it is you do now and how you got into all of that.
Sure, sure. Well, I'm a real estate investor. I have an extremely unusual model. I'm the only one, as far as I know, in the country that does this, and I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yes,
Um,
we
but
will.
but what really happened to me, uh, by the way, you said the word jobs. I didn't really have jobs. The closest I ever got to jobs, again, because no one wanted to hire me, was a couple 1099 positions. I sold some radio equipment. I sold some
Yeah.
insurance. But I started realizing in my 30s that there were some skill sets that I had that are really, really, excelled in. And again, I didn't realize it beforehand, but I realized anytime I did something sales related, I
Yeah.
did good. And I realized, like, I got into insurance sales for a huge company everybody on this podcast would heard of. And within a couple of months, I became rookie of the year in a city I didn't have any relatives in. And we all know how insurance works. They tell you go sell your friends and relatives, and then you're out of the business.
Yeah. Right.
But I became a rookie of the year out of a city I knew no one in, and I became a rookie of the year in a whole company across the whole nation.
Wow.
I had tremendous success in some other sales things. And then I also realized, because again, I was still bouncing, Ken, I also realized there were some things I didn't enjoy. Like, I could literally pinpoint, gosh, when I was selling this, I was making money, I was rocking and rolling, and then I try to chase a shiny object. And here's one other thing I realized before, in my early age, then when you do things that you don't know, you're never going to be good at it. And there were a couple things that I did back then that, because I did have skill set in the sales side, I got recruited into other industries where, Ken, I had zero skill set. And to this day, I've learned that if you're going to really excel at something, you got to be an expert.
Yep.
And if you're going to really enjoy something, you got to know what you're doing. And if you're not an expert and you don't enjoy what you're doing, chances are you're never going to get to those highest levels of whatever that is. So you couple all that with what I did. And my last stint before real estate, I actually got into the credit card processing industry, merchant services, a buddy of mine. And, we became pretty successful. We had franchised that company to 15 states because we met another guy that helped us do it. He saw what Greg and I were doing. And Warren took a lot of liking to us. He had a lot of money, so he financed us behind the scenes. And that was the last final time I really, really, really understood this whole concept I was just explaining to you. Even though at that early age, we had sold 15 franchises, we're making good money, I did not truly understand the industry.
Yeah.
And that was the last time I kind of made my, at that point I was like, okay, I'm no longer going to do things just because I think that's like there's an upside. I'm no longer going to do things that I really don't understand. I don't want to be hanger out, or I don't want to just kind of exist, because I never really truly understood that industry as a whole. So I got out of that industry, sold my shares, and was just sitting with somebody that I knew and respected. And one day he gave me a book by a gentleman named Lonnie Scruggs. And if anybody is in the real estate industry that listens to you, or especially mobile home industry, Lonnie used to be, he just passed away a year or two ago. He was like the grand poobah of the mobile home business.
Wow.
And I read that book. And again, there were some things I learned ahead in life. One of them was going back to that telemarketing job with magazines, where I learned, get around really successful people. I read that book. I knew nothing about mobile homes. I figured out who Lonnie was, and I called him up. I said, Lonnie, I know nothing about mobile homes. I just read your book last night. Best thing I've ever seen. I'm all in. What do I got to do? He's like, dude, I got a seminar this weekend. We jumped in the car. We went to a seminar that weekend. So I call him like on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm with Lonnie at one of his local seminars that he used to do from his own home back then. And I got back, and that same Tuesday, bought my first mobile home. And within 3 years, we had the largest brokerage of mobile homes in the state of Georgia. And I know you're a northern guy, so you probably don't appreciate it. But Georgia and mobile homes, that said a lot. The fact,
dude, I used to live in Kennesaw a long time ago.
You're 20 minutes from where I'm sitting right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah.
Back then, especially, there were tons and tons of mobile homes, especially Cobb Parkway. I don't know if you still remember that.
I had a business on Cobb Parkway in Marietta.
Okay. There you go. There used to be a bunch of dealerships back then when I got started. But that's when I really started thriving, because we were buying them, selling them, flipping them. And I was dealing with people. I was on the sales side. I was first time really start realizing, man, I don't know if I'll always do mobile homes, but I'm always going to do something I'm good at. Okay. That's an important thing. Yeah. I don't believe, I don't buy into, and I know some people do, but I don't buy into this philosophy you should be miserable your whole life. You know what I mean? So, I was good. I understood. I'm rest of my life, even if it's not mobile homes, I'm going to do something I'm good at and something I really understand. And I really, really, I had a partner back then, Jeff, and Jeff and I just absolutely rocked it out over the next 3 years in the mobile home business.
That's awesome, man. I have a friend that's in the Grant Cardone circle, Chris Rude, who lives down in Louisiana, and he's huge in the mobile home. He buys mobile home parks like crazy, and he's doing well. Very well.
A lot of upside in those boxes.
Yeah, right. So unless you're in Tornado Alley, then you don't want to. Yeah, but so talk about, and Jackie says he was about to say he does something unique in real estate. What is that? So what is that that's unique? And
sure.
I know a lot of people in the real estate game. I'm not one of them. I've owned one rental property in my entire life, and drug dealers shot holes through my dishwasher, and I said, I'm never doing this shit again. So, but I know I need to, but tell me about what's unique about what you do and what you're teaching, and how you get people involved in it.
Sure. Well, like I said, I lasted in the mobile home industry for about 3 years, because back then the financing for a lot of mobile homes. So then we transitioned into real estate, which is kind of the same. I realized very quickly real estate is not the same as mobile homes. I literally made myself homeless, believe it or not, within 8 months, living out of the backseat of my car, lost everything. Met my first mentor, and 3 years later, was able to get out of that mess. And became a fairly successful real estate investor out of Atlanta, Georgia. Did thousands and thousands of real estate transactions. But here's the best way I could describe what we do now. And reality of it is, well, you're a perfect example. One transaction, almost gets shot, or at least your dishwasher gets shot.
Yeah, right.
But Ken, I can tell you, reality of the industry that we're in is that it has a abysmal success rate. Absolutely abysmal success rate.
Really?
On the average, less than 3 to 5% of people ever make any money in real estate. And it's something we don't talk about. Those of us in the business, we just kind of sweep it under the rug. But what I always say is, kind of, Ken, what other industry would that acceptable in? Like, would you go to a hospital that's got a 3 to 5% success rate? You're going to go to a grocery store that 3 to 5% of the food is good and the rest will kill you.
Wow.
You're going to get on an airline that's got a 3. It is very, very interesting. But I am literally part of an industry that has probably one of the worst success rates out there. But it's been like that for so long. We just all accept it. Those of us that are in the business, those of us that had a chance to achieve, those of us that had a chance to educate others, we just kind of sweep it under the rug to a certain degree.
Wow.
And a lot of times we blame the students, like, well, we're telling them what to do and all this. But that problem does exist. And I'll tell you why it exists. It exists for a reason that nobody really thinks about. But when you start laying it out, you realize, wow, there's no other industry that does this. So no wonder that the success rate is so abysmal. Here's what happens to a typical person that wants to get in the real estate industry. And then I'll share with you how we've been able to overcome that and get our success rates through the roof with people we work with. But here's what happens to a typical person that wants to, get into real estate investing.
Yep.
The first thing is we know this is the first thing in any industry that you want to get into. The first thing is you got to know what you're doing. You got to learn this thing, right? And so the way most of us do it is we go to the typical gurus, right? There's plenty of educators out there. By the way, extremely good educators, extremely knowledgeable. You take a guy like Cardone, you take, tons and tons and tons of people that truly know what they're doing. So you go and you get your education here. And then you're like, okay, well, I've learned this thing. So now I got to do this thing, right? So the very first thing you need to do, if you think about it, if you're a real estate investor, the first thing is you got to find something, got to find a deal to do. So here's what what every typical investor does, right? They got trained on what to do. So now they got to find a deal. So most of us, or most people out there, they'll go to like a Google search engine and they'll type in marketing, lead generation. Well, when for real estate investors, and what'll happen is they'll see literally hundreds, if not thousands of different ways to find deals, direct mail, web-based marketing, signage, radio, and all this. So they'll try to, like, okay, based upon what I learned and based upon how much money I have or don't have, and based upon all this, I think this is what I got to do. I'm going to do this kind of marketing to find deals. So now they start finding a deal, and then they start realizing, well, it's not just finding the deal. Like, once I find what I think was a deal, I got to talk to these people, right? And let's face it, most people that get into the real estate industry, they're not professional speakers for sure. They're not even necessarily salespeople. So now they're like, gosh, I got to learn how to talk to these people. So let me get some training. Like let me train on how to talk to sellers, how to approach them, how to negotiate deals and all this. Yep. So now they're like, okay, so now there's hundreds and hundreds of different ways of doing it. Let me pick this one out. Okay. Then they realize that, well, okay, so now I've gotten this far. I got to make some decisions here, right? I got to make some decisions. Like, so I need some data. I need some information. Like, how do I know this thing will cash flow? It's a rental. Or how do I know a fix and flip? And there's plenty of ways to get information out there. There's tons of apps. There's tons of sources. So again, they're going to just try to figure out what they feel. Okay, here I'm going to get, let's say I'm going to get this app, and this is where I'm going to pull my comps from. This is where I'm going to put my data from. And then all of a sudden they're like, okay, so I've gotten this far in a deal. Gosh, I didn't even think about this, but I got to know how to close this thing. So, okay, so I got to be able to do contracts. I got to inspect this thing the right way, make sure there's nothing hidden, underneath whatever. I got to find a closing attorney. I got to coordinate closings. I got to make sure title is right. Okay, so now they're piecemealing that. Okay, let me call my local people that could do all this for me. And then they're like,
Great.
okay, well, now I got this thing. I guess I didn't think about it. I need money, right? I got to get money. So again, not very difficult necessarily. So they're out there Googling local money guys, right? They're called like, hard money lenders. And these are professional people, this. Okay, so boom, I found this guy, and you don't even realize that this guy's there to loan shark you and take advantage of you. And he's going to make more money in that deal than you are. And so they smell that. And then they realize, oh, wow, I guess I knew I had to do this because I learned it, but I didn't think about it. I got to fix this sucker. Okay, so let me ultimately see how bad I can get ripped off right here. So let me find the local contractor. And by the way, when I'm looking for a local contractor, I'm just going to stamp the word newbie investor, have no idea what I'm doing. And so I'm going to have every contractor see that sign, and they know how to play this game like better than anyone. They know how to come in with low bids just to get the job. They know how to boom. And usually by that time you're on, you're on a breathing apparatus, you're on life support. You're just cannot wait to get the heck out of this business, but you got this stupid deal. You got, like you said, did one deal and you can't wait to get rid of it. Yeah. Right. You're on life support and all this, and then you got to figure out how to sell it. And you're like, when you're done, like, man, I'm glad I didn't lose all my savings. I lost half of it, but I still got half of it left. Or God forbid, and so here's the problem. This is why we have such an abysmal success rate. There's nothing centralized at the real estate investing industry. It's all piecemealed. It is all piecemealed. And it is no different, Ken, than me telling you, well, you know what? I know you like a Rolls Royce. And in Marion, Ohio, we got 10 junkyards. So you're not going to go around the junkyard, and we're going to just find different pieces of different cars, and we're going to put a Rolls Royce together. And you would look at me and you would laugh. You'd say, there's no chance in the world that would work.
Right.
But that's exactly what happens in the real estate industry. You piecemeal it. And not only are there 20 different parts of the real estate business that have to be piecemealed, what most people don't understand is within each one of these parts, like within marketing, there's 6,000 different marketing ways of doing it. Yeah. Within money sources, what most people don't realize, there's 1,000 money sources out there, but there's right ones and wrong ones. And, the contractor thing, we could sit here talk for an hour about. And when you piecemeal it all together, it's like having an assembly line putting a car together. But, you put together here, and then you go to a different assembly line 6 hours away, and then you fly the car to California. Yeah. This is why assembly lines, they have to flow, and real estate has never had a flow to it. It's always piecemeal together. And an average investor has no idea how to piecemeal it together. And this is exactly why we have such an incredibly poor success rate in this industry. It's so poor, no one even talks about it anymore. And this is how I feel like we've solved this problem. Because what I do is I partner with people across the United States, and I do deals with them. But the most important thing we put everything under one roof. We put everything under one roof. For instance, we teach and educate all of my partners under one roof.
Wow.
I spend my own money in their markets, and I actually generate leads because I know what kind of leads work and what kind of don't. I provide them technology because out of the 6,000 ways of getting information, I know which ones work and which ones don't. So we literally hand them the technology that works. My back office does all the back office things for my partners. We do contracts for them. We do inspections for them. We process things. We find local closing agents. We coordinate buyers. We coordinate sellers. None of my partners have to even worry about back office.
Wow.
We provide contractors for them. Because I've had 22 years history and done thousands of deals with these partners, we now know a network of contracts across the United States. So our contractors literally go out to these cities and we help them fix these properties. We have a team of agents that then sell these properties. And so the question is, well, how can I sit here and tell you, Ken, that I've got it all figured out? Because I do one other thing that no one else will do. I provide all my partners money to do these deals with. I put my money where my mouth is. I back them financially. So not only do we provide everything that everyone needs to execute and to do deals correctly, I'm so confident in what we do, and we've done it thousands of times, and we do all of our deals with partners across the United States. I actually fund the deal 100%. I give them unlimited money to have as much money as they need to close as many deals as they want. I literally put my money where my mouth is, and this is why when people partner with me and my team, our success rate is through the roof. Because, go ahead.
I want to play the devil's advocate, may I?
100%. Let's do it.
You're like, oh, great. This guy's going to call me out on something. I'm not calling you out. My question is, I think, a logical question. If it sounds like you have an unbelievable machine in place, why do you even need partners?
Well, because ultimately, remember, I do this all over the nation. Ultimately, real estate is a local business. Okay, just like your rental was probably around where you lived, it wasn't across the country. Real estate is a local business. So my partners, they become my local boots on the ground. But because they become boots on the ground, that is worth me giving 50% of profit to them. That is how important the local boots on the ground. And as a result, Ken, of them becoming boots on the ground, all of my partners, they themselves become extraordinarily savvy investors because they go through all of these processes. But they could feel very comfortable that they're going through these processes with us backing them. They know that they're doing it the right way. And guess what? Here's the ultimate thing. What happens when something's wrong? I assume all the risk. So every once in a while, things still go wrong. In real estate, things always go wrong.
Yeah.
And if something ever happens, I not only give my partners 50% of the upside, I assume 100% of all the downside. And I'll tell you, and I know this sounds a little, it's a near perfect way for anyone that wants to be in the real estate business to actually be in the real estate business.
That's insane. That's insane. That is unbelievable. My wife says, what a smart business model. And Jackie's on here talking about JT Fox, and I don't know much about JT Fox. I know Grant really well. But wow, man,
by the way, exactly what Jackie just said is exactly right. Plenty of people give you money in real estate. Just Google it. Money is not the issue. Issue is the 30 other parts that have to take place along the way to make sure the deal goes off. Real money is it's the big one. It's kind of the one everyone talks about. But all those other things are just as important. Nobody talks about it. Nobody talks, well, what marketing do I use? How do I script it? How do I negotiate it the right way? How do I process the back office part? What technology? How do I make decisions? Where I get my numbers? Everything we do under one roof.
Look what she says. Look what she says there. All the and I'm sure she's right. I had a mobile home. It was a double wide in West Virginia when I lived there. And that's my only rental property I ever had. I lived in it for a while, then upgraded to a bigger house and rented that out. And it was a nightmare for me. So let me ask you, because I know you're limited on time. I don't normally I would say, let's go over, but you got other things going on. I get it. So the theme of this show is, and Jackie says, incredible hand-holding he is offering. So you guys sounds like you and Jackie need to talk. Let me ask you a question in keeping with the theme of this show and what you're doing. What do you think? I mean, there will be thousands of people that hear this over time. They're going to watch the replay, listen to it, all of that. Mm-hmm. And you and I both know that only a tiny little percentage will actually take action, reach out to you, do what they need to do to get involved and achieve the levels of success you're talking about. What do you think stops people from having real financial success and freedom in life?
Well, look, I don't think it's just a one cookie cutter answer. Some people have been beat up enough in life. They literally give up. That's probably the saddest part of the group of people, the ones that truly, truly give up. And they give up way too early in the game, as most of us know.
Yeah.
Some people don't want it bad enough. Some people don't understand the principle of success. Some people, here's one of the most frustrating thing I see people. They put success into a box. What I mean by that is they put a timeline on it. Okay, I'm going to go all in for 3 months. Like, let me see, how old are you? Well, I'm 50 years old. How much you got in your checking account? I got 5,000. Okay, so for 50 years old, you went all in into being broke. No timeline, no nothing. You're 100% old, but now you have a chance to be success. You know what I mean? So here's one thing: you
Yeah.
cannot put success into a timeline. You can't put it in timeline, and you can't put it in the box. Meaning, if this happens, then I'll do it. Like,
Right.
if I find a deal, I'm going to do it. Or if I achieve some success, then I'm going to stick with it. The other thing, Ken, that happens is most people don't have no idea how to judge success. Too many people judge success in the beginning based upon how much money they're making. Well, you and I both know it has nothing to do with it. In the
Right.
beginning, it's not about making money. It's about 20,000 other things.
Yeah.
Money comes as a result of those 20,000 other things.
Yep.
So most people have no idea how to evaluate where they are in the process. Had I evaluated myself in real estate when I got started 22 years ago, I made myself homeless 8 months down the road. I'd say that is like, if someone's going to say that is failure. But had I evaluated myself back then based upon how much money I was making, I'd be out 22 years ago. But I learned that it's not how much money you're making, how many deals you've done, how much success that you think you should be having.
Yeah.
Success is evaluated based upon other things, effort, maybe, whatever industry you're in, how many calls you're making, how many approaches, how big is your pipeline, though that's how. So most people put a timeline on success. You can't do it. Put success in a box. If this happens, then I'll do this. You can't put success in a box. You have to learn how to evaluate. This is why it's so important. Since most of us aren't, by the way, none of us are taught these things. Who's taught these things? This is why it's so important to have the ultimate. We talk about what prevents people. Let me tell you what gets people to success. In my opinion, number one thing is aligning with the right people.
Yep.
That's the ultimate shortcut. See, when I aligned myself with the right person, I immediately right away realized no timeline. It's whenever, however, how long. No what if this thing to death, okay? It's this, and I learned how to evaluate it. Back then, I learned not to evaluate it based on what money I was making. I learned to have other KPIs. I learned to have other indications. But all of that came not because I got smart. All it became because I started aligning myself. And I tell people, as far as I'm concerned, in my 50-some years of life, that is the ultimate shortcut to success. The ability to align yourself with the right people, because then you're literally starting to piggyback off their success. And this is why I'm so proud of what we do. Everyday people align themselves with myself and my team, and we're able to piggyback them to huge levels of success.
So, and Jackie asks if it costs. I would imagine there's some sort of a you're not,
we have different levels of partnering. But we'll talk about how to connect and all that.
Yeah. Well, I've got your website scrolling, and I know we're out of time. Man, I wish we weren't, because this is valuable information. Like, it's so valuable. And look, Jackie said, I'm aligned. Let's go.
Well, at least it's resonating with one person.
I know,
one
right?
person is all in.
I know.
Can't wait to get started, Jackie.
But I do think that it's important. I'm doing a private mastermind thing with a buddy of mine that toured with Guns N' Roses and Air Supply, and we have some of the biggest celebrities ever known to mankind that are going to be there teaching at this thing, and that's our entire theme, Peter. It's about it's who you're around. Like, people need to get that, man. Like, it is so important to align yourself with the right people. And I think you'll agree with this. As soon as you realize you're not aligned with the right people, get out, cut ties, and go. Do you agree?
100%. Because aligning yourself with the wrong people does opposite of what aligning yourself with the right people does.
Yep.
That's really what it comes down to.
People get so emotionally invested in those bad relationships, and Dude, listen, I just called you dude. Sorry.
That's
Peter,
okay.
listen.
I've been called worse.
It's something that I just do to everybody.
No,
But
no.
like,
Hey, by the way, and I know you got the website scrolling, but I'll tell you the best way to get a hold of me is actually through some of my social media. And like, for instance, if you go to Instagram.com/my name, Peter Vekselman, you'll see the same picture you see there of me. That is the ultimate way to align yourself. Like Instagram.com/Peter Vekselman. That is, you'll see a little bit, you'll learn more about me. Just follow me, click the link in my bio, and that's the best way to connect with me.
that's awesome, man. So everybody go to Instagram and follow. Robert Brooker says it's a good sign when Ken calls you dude. I mean, I've called Grant Cardone dude. So, I do think that everybody needs to look into this. You and I are going to have further conversation. So
I'd love it.
if you'll hang on for me real quick, I know you have to go here in a second. I'm going to end this, but I'd like to chat with you real fast if we could.
Yep.
So listen, everybody, make sure you go to the website, go to Instagram, follow Peter, and reach out to him for more information. Thank you all so much. Thank you if you shared this out. Have an awesome day. And Peter, thank you so much for coming on.
Appreciate it for having me, Ken. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. See you guys.